support. Look at the polls. It doesn't start. You don't start a war with 30 to 40% of the population supporting you. It's completely different. After Pearl Harbor, 96% of the population supported FDR. So you're starting with a situation where you don't have popular support. It's all guaranteed to go downhill as time goes on. And then you're now talking about sending ground forces in. Forget it. This is going to really backfire in Trump's face.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I think, I understand you're on his team as a, PR press for, but you'll get some kind of a note of it. So, Julian, is it that horrific? Do we have the creature from hell taking us by the neck and shoving us into the toilet of an unnecessary conflict that has no? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I put a link on the side for an article I wrote almost exactly 20 years ago, where I used wargaming and Dupuy mathematical calculations to look at how the U.S. Could take over parts of Iran. I think from a military standpoint, Iran is very vulnerable. 2/3 of its population live in the middle and the north west of the country. So when we're looking at Bandar Abbas, which is the Straits of Hormuz, it's actually quite weakly defended. You've got 2 brigades, one IRGC, one army. That's about 5,000 people each, and you got a whole bunch of sailors. So it's not that hard to take Iran. Furthermore, 80% of its fuel reserves are offshore, or they're along the coast to the west of the country. And again, there's a very thin population living there, and most of that territory is in the plain. The problem is, if the U.S. lands, the Iranians have a very large population, and they're going to be firing artillery at you from the mountains that are right inland. And so it'll take a lot of effort to stop that level of harassment. So in some respects, if Trump had planned for the Straits of closure of the Straits of Hormuz, which he didn't, he would have some Marines, some airborne, some air assault units ready, and they could have gone in. And they could have gone in quite easily, I think. It's surprising this wasn't done. Obviously, he was doing a Hail Mary. He didn't want to put guys on the ground because it's a part of the Republican Party's platform. So, he was hoping that Iran would fold. I'm actually supportive of the regime change goal. Regime change through airborne attack is obviously quite difficult. But we have a general shift in Iran, and the problem is neither the Americans or the Israelis are actually committed to regime change. What the Israelis, I think, are trying to do is inflict enough damage to normalize attacking Iran over and over again in the future. And I think the U.S. Is following along, hoping the Israelis have a plan, which they don't. Certainly, the U.S. doesn't have the strategic freedom to be able to bomb Iran every 2 years, because you can't. As impressive as the Israelis are at targeting specific individuals, Iran has a fairly effective secondary education system with a lot of people that study physics and engineering. Now, on the downside, Iran is a country that supported Russia's attack on Ukraine with drones. I mean, they're gleefully happy to get in on the Russian-Chinese. I don't even want to call it a coalition, because these are 3 nationalist societies, which, like World War II, the nationalism makes it impossible for them to cooperate. I mean, racist Nazis, racist Imperial Japanese, and fascist Italians are automatically mutually suspicious and generally not sensitive to each other's cultures or interests. And China, Russia, and Iran are probably even less able to communicate than those fascist countries from World War II. The big problem for regime change is Iran's per capita income is about 4,000 US bucks, which is slightly ahead of Egypt and slightly below Bolivia. So, and that's with a large oil economy. Even if the oil economy is under sanctions, it gives Iran a type of freedom that Bolivia doesn't have. So, Iran's probably the illusion that we have, for example, and I don't want to minimize Israel's obvious genocide in Gaza, but if Gaza were completely free and had no barriers, prosperity would still take a very long time. Most of Iran's situation are not sanctions, it's just unbelievable scale of corruption in civil society, and it can't only be blamed on the mullahs. If you rotated out the mullahs, which don't account for such a large percentage of the society, you basically have a lack of the respect for the rule of law and very weak institutions. So it takes Iran a long time to build itself up. In some respects, as someone who's not particularly sympathetic for the way that Israel is manipulating the U.S. and shaking up international law, the Iranian leadership is wildly incompetent. The Iranians are not going to benefit by keeping them, even if they do represent some of the positive aspects of Islam in some areas. One of which I think is the imams in Iran have been fairly consistently against developing nuclear weapons. But I think the Israelis made a calculation. We had better hit Iran before the mullahs are gone, because when the nationalist Persians get in power, they will build a bomb. So they made a sort of a risk calculation in that. I have an article coming out tomorrow in Real Clear Defense, which is entitled "Pakistan Can Easily Capture the Straits of Hormuz." Now, if you look at the Pakistani press, it's dominated by the fact that the Saudis and the Americans on one hand, not so much the Americans, but the Saudis and the Emiratis are pressuring Pakistan to do something, and the Iranians are pressuring Pakistan not to do something, along with the Chinese. And Pakistani tankers at the moment are being allowed through by the Iranians. The reason I have it titled like that is the Fifth Corps of the Pakistan Army is 1,500 kilometers by a flat, wide highway in a plane away from Bandar Abbas. And that corps has got 45,000 soldiers. Half of that corps are two mechanized divisions, an armored brigade, a brigade of engineers, a brigade of artillery, and Pakistan's got, something I did not know, 800 rotary wing aircraft, many of which function to turn the 44th Light Infantry Division into air mobile troops. So Pakistan can just roll in, and their net opposition is 2 light infantry brigades. And there's about 3 divisions of artillery, armor, and mech that is regular Iranian army that could come in within a couple of days. Plus the Pakistanis have a fairly robust air force. You've got the Saudis that would support them. Very likely the U.S. would support them, and so supply from the ocean would obviously save the Pakistanis the effort of having to garrison the entire 1,500-kilometer route. But of course, I suspect the Americans don't have an atlas, and so they don't know where Pakistan is, or who's in Pakistan, or what Pakistan has in its military, which is why they've never even thought of the idea. I think Pakistan could do it and get an enormous profit. Maybe another IMF loan, maybe F-35 aircraft. It depends how desperate the Americans get to need to open the straits.
Right.
That's my bet.
Okay, thanks. Okay, hey, Alex wants to participate.
Julian, did I miss the news where the Pakistanis are besieging the Iranian embassies and not the American ones? I mean, how would you turn the Pakistani people, who hate the Americans much more than they hate the Iranians, and actually again have some strategic interest, for example, both of them in combating Baluchi separatism? Why would they want to, again, why would Pakistan want to, give the lives of its citizens to defend the United States and Israel? Especially when, again, in the 12-Day War, they expressed support for the Iranians, and even, again, talked about, well, if Israel attacks Iran with a nuclear weapon, they might either retaliate themselves or give Iran nuclear weapons in that situation. I mean, I don't know where you're getting this idea that Pakistan would get involved in this when again their population again would not be in support of that. And I don't see what the government why they would. I mean, unless you truly think they're like pure American lackeys and will just do whatever Trump tells them.
Oh yeah. So can I be heard? Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Alex, you're completely right. You're 100% right. So I made two lists: 10 reasons why Pakistan should go, and 10 reasons why they probably not. You hit three of those, definitely not. It should be qualified that the 15% 50% of Pakistan's population is Shia. On the one hand, they're actually surprisingly influenced by the political orientation in Tehran when you wouldn't expect it because they're ethnically not even Persian. Um, uh, and it's true that it's not the Shia that are necessarily besieging American embassies, which have already occurred twice. Like the Pakistanis have twice seized the embassy, including during the Iranian Revolution. So you're quite right. In terms of the mob on the street, Pakistanis are quite hostile to Americans. But it should be qualified that Pakistani hostility to Americans is not the same brand of hostility that you see in Arab states because of American and European support for Zionism. In South Asia, you have a caste system. People don't like, even in Pakistan, you have a fear of the caste system since many of the Muslims are lower caste converts. And so they dislike generic Western people because of the colonial experience and the humiliation. And so everyone in both India, Pakistan,
Yeah,
Bangladesh,
and
Iran,
Pakistanis are often mistreated in the Gulf states. I mean,
Okay, wait, hold it. Alex,
no, sorry, Alex is muted. Alex is right about that too. Pakistanis are also humiliated by the Saudis, definitely. I was on a trip from Bangladesh, having to help illiterates fill out their cards, and Alex is right. But the thing is, when you're dealing with a country like Bangladesh, which is almost 200 million people, people are so desperate to make some money that they'll forgive the Emirates for running, essentially slave labor or very low cost labor, and they see it as an opportunity. It's pathetic. I was involved in a police operation because someone from France and someone from Saudi Arabia ran a scam where they collected all the money to profit, to arrange the documents, and they had several thousand people involved in this, and then they skipped town. And because I hung out with these guys for about a week, they basically came to me to find out where the hell these guys went. So yeah, no, it's
Julie, so you've met some of those workers, like essentially, like they take your passport, and you're like, I mean, you're almost literally a slave in a lot of these cases.
When they got on the airplane in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, they'd have their information on a card with a string around their neck. So you have a whole plane of these guys, and maybe 10% were going to keep. We were landing in Saudi Arabia at the time. We went and kept flying onto London, and so the plane emptied out by 90%. But I mean, you're right. I mean, Indians and Pakistanis form a very large proportion of the labor. And curiously, countries like the Emirates and Qatar, obviously they're outnumbered by the number of foreigners. The actual Arab population there is quite small compared to the workers. They actually have a lot more Indians than Pakistanis because they fear, in some respects, Pakistan. Right? Pakistan could theoretically take over the place. I'm actually a lot more concerned about a future Indian superpower in the region than Chinese, frankly. China's very far away, and it's not been there. India could lay claim, and every day, Indian maritime reconnaissance aircraft fly near the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, if anyone should open the straits, it's India, in my opinion.
Okay, so somebody else I have a question, generally speaking. Nobody was predicting that Trump was going to wake up and say, let's beat the shit out of Iran. So you can't predict what you said, and based on past behavior, you don't think Pakistan could be lulled into participating in any aggressive actions against Iran. Yeah, it's a whole country. There's politics. I'm sure the country is not solidified. It's probably broken apart into factions like in most countries. And, somebody can do whatever can happen. So there's a potential there. And like Spencer said, it's right across. There it is. It's goes right across to across land right there to come in the back like Lawrence of Arabia.
But for the Pakistanis, it's the front. But I'd like to hear more of what Alex said. I mean, his other points.
Go ahead.
Well, first, yeah, I'll type in the chat. Yeah. Well, Ken, I guess you have a short memory because I'm pretty sure, and actually probably on this program at some point, if we go back, I'm pretty sure. Well, I predicted at least that Israel would attack Iran again after the 12-day war happened, and I just
Yeah.
definitely discussed the possibility that the U.S. would also do it. So somebody, and I'm pretty sure Jim had at least that, mentioned the possibility. Again, it would have been on, back in June, I guess, yeah, whenever that happened after. But the more interesting thing for me again is, and I don't know if you want to, I have, the interview, we won't play all of it because it's a long one, but an excellent one. Interview Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, did for Chris Hedges on the
Wait a minute.
because that's where the serious stuff is going to happen.
No, wait
I
a
think
minute.
that's where the U.S. basically is going to reach the end of the line here once all the supply shock of losing 20% of the world's oil is gonna it's gonna, I think, again, in maybe a month or another two, we're gonna be essentially facing the second Great Depression, and Wall Street's gonna be screaming at Trump to pull the plug on everything and to basically even give Iran a lot of what Iran is demanding, which again, because they're going to care a lot more about their bank accounts than about Israel or American strategic interest. They're going to be concerned that the economy's going to be in the toilet, and well, of course, again, that's going to Trump's chances in the elections will be zero at that point, and he'll be more worried again, as Frank has said in the past, about avoiding jail and maybe
Alex,
even thinking about eating his gun
Alex,
at
what
that point.
about what's happening in Iran? Isn't there a high potential that the population's going to say, well, they're getting rid of the security guards. Now we can go in and storm the castle. You're telling me all the bad things
Okay,
that
well,
are going to
tell me
happen.
when that has
You're
happened
giving me
historically.
one side.
Tell me when a country has been bombed into
No.
into
There was a
revolution.
revolution. There was a revolution in Iran. What was it, 1979?
Yeah,
And it
because
was the public they
no,
overthrew.
because and the government there is now much more popular because first off, because
It's
of the whole
not.
history
That's
of
not true. That's
no,
not
it
true.
is. It is.
No, it isn't.
It's what happens in a war. What do you think happens in a war? What happened to us after
You
Pearl
don't
Harbor?
sound like you're very
Yes,
supportive of.
Ken,
What
you
about
don't
you? Are you
understand.
supportive of
We
our
did
war?
we did the equivalent of what the Japanese did at Pearl Harbor. We so
Absolutely.
pissed them off. Again, we launched a sneak attack, and not
Yep.
just once. We during negotiations. We're in the middle. We're supposedly negotiating with them not once but twice again because when the Israel attack was in the middle of
Wait a minute.
negotiations,
Stop it. I have to haunt you. You don't get it. There were videos of people celebrating in Iran after they killed the leaders. There was a segment of the population that was
yeah,
agreeing, thank you for getting rid of those assholes.
a
Now
small
you're
a small
saying that
part.
it, no, you're saying that
But Ken,
you're just saying it didn't happen. All you're doing is just saying, oh, what's going to happen is the Wall Street's going to collapse and we're going to hang Trump by his heels, and we're going to take over.
Ken,
The
Ken,
Democrats are going to take over.
if you go into the even the Iranian diaspora community, you talk to them now. Again, a lot of them are saying again,
A
yeah,
lot of them. How do
we
you
would
know?
like the
Come on.
government.
What are you coming up? You're
I don't
just
want
making.
I don't want my.
You're just saying so. You're just saying so. There's no evidence of it.
No,
So anyhow, It's okay to
You
say
want me to talk or
potentially.
not, Ken? Because you keep
Well,
muting me.
I want you
He's
to talk
muted. This
reasonable.
is you can mute somebody for
Don't just rant,
you
Ken.
can do that.
Let me
Okay.
make my
Yeah,
points.
because what you're
Yeah.
doing is what the government here is doing, that they don't let it, people express themselves.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
I'm
Alejandro.
just gonna go then. I'm sorry. This is
Yeah,
not
no,
what
thank
I
you.
was looking for.
No,
Okay, go
again, the
ahead. Let's
point
hear some more about how we're going to lose.
I'm just I'm saying again the core as that's more likely we're going to lose. And again, I don't see a way for again. Yeah, of course, Trump is saying, "Oh, we're destroying everything and we're hitting all the targets." Well, first off, again, actually, people have tracked the number of missiles and drones. Actually, pointed out that in the past few days, they've actually the number of attacks by Iran has gone up. So obviously, they're gearing up their production. And again, it's not going down. So this whole idea, oh, they're going to run out any day now. It's just like, again, we were hearing with Russia for, the past 4 years. They're not going to. One thing to understand here, Ken, who has Iran been planning to fight the past 40 years?
Israel.
Well, no, 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 no. United States. The United States has been their main threat for. Jim can tell you. Jim was looking at the IRGC in Iran. Way back in the 80s during the Iran War. Jim can tell you. He and Richard Juba did a lot of extensive research into the Iranian military back then, where Jim knew again all the different units they had back then again, and he's been kind of restarting his research on what they have now, but Jim knew that stuff cold back then, and he knew Jim. Well, if you're assuming you're still there, who did the Iranians consider the great Satan back then?
Your mama. No, no, they considered us the great Satan.
Yeah, and the Soviets might have been the little Satan because again they were also helping the Iraqis among other
No.
things.
Well,
But yeah, they didn't consider Israel to be.
oh no, no, no. Israel was way up there. I mean, Israel.
But yeah,
The
but again,
Ayatollah. The
who's
Ayatollah. When Khomeini came in, remember there were all these
yeah,
Iranians
yeah.
who had been trained in the PLO camps, and the Ayatollah brought in Yasser Arafat almost immediately to
Right.
visit. And then, of course, initially they turned over the U.S. embassy to the PLO. Oh no,
Oh, really? I
they
forgot
gave
that part.
they gave the Israeli embassy to the PLO to operate
Ah,
out.
right.
So yeah, the Israelis were on the hit list immediately when the revolution.
We've been who they've been planning to fight for the
Oh yeah,
longest time, right?
yeah.
Yeah, you
Well,
yeah.
both
See,
us and the
and
Israelis.
and again, because Iran only has to, again, worry about Israel maybe too. They don't really think about, as much as Julian's made it, pointed it out as an option, they don't, I mean, they may think about fighting the Gulf states, but when they think in those terms, they think of the Gulf states with the United States. So again, so they can focus basically on one enemy. The U.S. has to focus on, fighting in, all on 6 different continents and, multi-dimensional, many different kinds of wars. We got to think, okay, how do we fight an insurgency again? How do we fight, peer to peer? How do you fight against somebody smaller? So we have to basically be it's like the saying, a jack of all trades, master of none. And again, we have a lot of money to do that, but that means again we're not, they can specialize in beating us, and we can't do it because we're trying to fight everybody.
Well, it'd be interesting. I know that both Jillian, myself, and you can talk till the cows come home.
Yeah, but
Let's
yeah,
some of these
I
other guys
haven't.
jump
I
in there. Corey
Corey
and
or James.
Alejandra and Jim and
Yes, yeah.
Gail.
Yeah, let's get it from you guys. Raise your hand. Put your hand up. We'll put you right on. Corey, James, Alejandra.
Chris.
Yeah, even Gail.
Chris, be curious to see what Chris has.
And then Chris. Yes. Come on, Chris. What's your take on this? Is this just a folly of a stupid, vain, narcissistic thing that Trump's trying to get more airtime?
Well, I think Trump he has a huge ego. I mean, everything should start with that. So Trump wants to do something that will get him on Mount Rushmore. And I'm not joking.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to get on Mount Rushmore. He wants to be the most special president ever. So you've got a guy who he doesn't want to be a normal president. He doesn't want to take care of things. So he's willing to gamble because it's gambling with other people's money, other people's lives, other people's routines, all in the hopes that he will land something. I fixed NATO. I finally dealt with Iran. I finally dealt with. I'm going to get Cuba. Hell, even the Kennedys couldn't make that happen. If you don't understand that everything that fool does is the same thing that a petulant 13-year-old would do if he was ugly his whole life, fat his whole life, and finally got a chance to date a pretty girl, you don't understand human psychology, and you definitely will never understand Donald Trump. So that's just table stakes. So yeah, he wants to do something special. I also do think he really wants to take people's minds off of domestic things. The fact that prices didn't drop like a rock on day one, like he promised. The fact that his deportation thing is wildly unpopular. They'll never hit the numbers they were projecting. The fact that he hasn't fixed the economy. I mean, he hasn't succeeded in anything domestically other than closing the border. And what people, unfortunately, his heartless MAGA cultists don't know or seem to care about is he's succeeded in closing the border. He's also succeeded in closing, I think, to any sort of normal, legitimate asylum seeker. So he's not dealing in complexity at the border. He's dealing in it with a harsh club that said, we're just not letting anybody in. And frankly, they don't want to let anybody in because most of the people coming in are the people that racist named Stephen Miller sitting up in the White House doesn't want in. This blood and soil stuff, the Stephen Miller stuff, the Laura Loomer, it's the new KKK. I don't think Trump is really one of them, but he'll go along with them as long as his agenda gets done. So no, I don't think there's any legitimacy to this. And I'll just stop by saying this, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I pray every night that gas goes to $9.50 a gallon, because that's the only way that the people who keep supporting Trump will finally abandon him. Not out of any sense of stability or righteousness, because they lost that long time ago. It'll be out of pure self-interest, which seems to be the only thing some of them can be moved by. That's what I think.
Okay, good. So Trump is on the stage, and it's basically it's all around him, like King Lear. Or
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's it. Is there any opposition that has status again opposing him that doesn't just look like they're jealous?
Jealous of that fool?
Yeah, like in other words, Gary Newsom, Gary, not
I mean,
Gavin.
Gavin Newsom.
Garrison. He came up and he started doing the same kind of verbal attacks that Trump does. He mimicked
No,
him.
I like Gavin. Gavin, it's like in the black neighborhood on the street corner. Gavin knows how to play the dozens.
Uh-huh.
He can come up with really bad stuff to say about your mama.
Uh-huh. Okay,
And
but
if I had a chance with Trump, the first two things I'd ask him is, "You're so damn smart. Why'd you only get into Fordham when you got out of the military school? And secondly, why are you so afraid for anybody to see your transcripts and your grades? Because you're an idiot and you're a lazy fuck." Excuse my language.
yeah. So you like Gavin Newsom. Okay. So okay, great. Let's go. How about you, James? You got anything to say on this Iranian holiday? James Gain or Adrena or
I have a
Gail?
little thing to say.
Go ahead.
I hate to bring it up again, but all this stuff is a distraction from the Epstein imbroglio, which could cause Trump a lot more legal problems with his love of women or whatever. I mean, he might have to go to jail. Today we had Pam Bondi trying to skirt the legal onslaught about Epstein with the oversight committee in the House. So, you know, we have a little problem with that Epstein stuff. There's 3 million documents that are still being sequestered by Pam Bondi and her department, apparently. The other thing we might address with the Iranian or the Iran situation for the US is apparently there's been a request for $200 million more for the Defense Department budget. So besides the oil, the burden of diminution of oil supplies, we also have an obvious balance of payment problem looming, which perhaps someone else could address.
Okay. So you think it's just a diversion he's bringing up trouble to control domestic politics?
Well, it's certainly part of it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it, but The Intercept, they had an article, I'll put it in the chat in a minute, and they, meaning Omidyar's publication, they were citing somebody, I think it might be Brown's, Watson Institute, which does like these kind of economic analyses. Oh yeah, here. Well, oh yeah, this isn't by Nick Turs. Yeah, Trump's war on Iran could cost trillions, and their estimate was again, if the war lasts 8 weeks, a quarter trillion, $250 billion. Put it in the chat. And again, if it lasts 4 to 6 weeks, probably half that. So again, 125 billion. Because again, basically, they're pointing out that again, this is Nick Turris, who's again a very good military analyst that works for them. He wrote the definitive book on atrocities by the U.S. in Vietnam, among other. But he's done a lot of reporting on AFRICOM. I think Jim might know him somehow. Anyway, yeah. So he said, 125 billion in a few weeks, and again, if it goes 8 weeks, they estimate $250 billion. So again, by, we would be hitting $1 trillion somewhere by that, it's just, we're using so many expensive missiles and, again, flying all those planes, a lot of fuel, the ships, everything. It's, it's a huge expense. So basically, like, we would double the defense budget in like I don't know, 3 or 4 months at the rate we're spending it. So think about that kind of money. I mean, what's that? That's, blowing a gigantic hole in the budget, among other things.
Okay, Alex, let's give Julian a chance. Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of points about bombing societies to make them change their policies. Obviously, there's there's a lot of evidence of hurting people by bombing them. And to get them to be less hostile to you. So the Japanese, inflicted obviously a lot of egregious bombing against the Chinese in the 1930s and 40s, and it had a huge political effect. So I think what we are talking about is using bombing to democratize countries, right? It's to hit certain people so that this class of people who want to be more liberal can suddenly be freed. And obviously, there are far fewer cases of that. So we did see that in, I would argue, Libya. What you had in Libya was, with Gaddafi going down, is the bombing that the Europeans and NATO and the US and Canada did eliminated the military power of the elite, but we didn't, of course, get a democratic Libya because the people that were demonstrating were representing regional power bases and they were not liberal, right? So obviously you don't want to bomb a society to create a democracy if there's no one there ready to take over and make it a democracy. We did have that with Italy in World War II. I mean, one of the main reasons that Mussolini was displaced is because the Italian people in general were very unhappy with the heavy bombing from the British and Americans. And that did start a process in the direction of liberalization. The bombing of Serbia actually included bombing the wealth, the factories, the businesses of the cronies that supported the Milosevic government. So again, it didn't make Serbia liberal because overwhelmingly the Serbians supported the deportations in Kosovo. But at least it got rid of the better armed members of the elite, so you could have a regime that you could communicate with. Hungary in World War II definitely didn't want to get bombed. And so they negotiated with the US not to bomb them, they wouldn't shoot up. So it seems to me the main problem with bombing Iran to make it democratic is, it's too poor outside of the cities and in the slums to generate the kind of stable, uncorrupt, non-paternalistic, non-client patron relationship and the non-rent seeking type of disbalance in education to create a liberal democracy. It's today a procedural democracy, although you can get rid of candidates if they're not religiously appropriate. If it were to get rid of the mullahs, if you heavily subsidize it like the US does Iraq, you might be able to pay enough money to enough people so they could play parliament in Tehran. But it would be very expensive because Iran is a lot bigger and it was always a lot more cohesive than Libya, than Iraq. So obviously it's going to be difficult. The main problem is timing. I mean, the Warsaw Pact collapsed in about 3 days, minus obviously Romania, which took a bit longer, and it never needed to be bombed. The problem is information. It's really hard to observe when the people who organize the revolt, who are automatically isolated and secretive because people are chasing them to know when they're going to revolt. We don't see an identified leader in Iran. The exiles outside of Iran are like every exile we've ever seen from a revolution, whether it's Mexico, the Russian Revolution, the Iranian Revolution going to Saddam Hussein. They always exaggerate how weak the regime is. They're probably out of contact with what's going on. And most of the stress they feel is hurt pride in the new country they're in because they don't have the same status they had. So they're sort of dreaming of going home, and people at home don't like them because they obviously chased them out. So they have a high incentive to change the narrative. I think Iran is on some level ready for a shift because if you're looking at the Gen Z and the millennials, which is people born after 1985 in Iran, going to the mosque for religious services has dropped precipitously. Iran is 75% urban today, 25% rural. They have some mechanization. On some level, I think they could. So what I would imagine is they would liberalize the economy. Would be recharged by having the sanctions removed, and so their 44,000, 4,500 GDP per capita would probably jump to about 8,000. And 8,000 is a magic number because once you're democratic at 8,000, you can never go back. And that's basically Mexico. That's China, for example. If China democratizes, they won't go back. Just a historical point. I always thought that the biggest threat to Iran, not rhetorically, but in reality, was the Soviet Union. And you could tell by looking at where the Iranian army was, even during the Iran-Iraq War. And it was for the very simple reason that, one, the Russians took the largest chunk out of Iran in the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Chechnya.
Hang up too.
Number two, the Soviets had a very large army on the Iranian border and had a plan to invade through Iran. Number three, the Iranians had a very influential two-day communist component operating within the oil industry and in civil society in Iran. So I think the Americans, frankly, don't have good worldly knowledge and just assume when the Iranians were complaining, they're complaining about the Americans. I actually think most Iranians were thinking about the Russians. And I want to make one last comment. The idea that Trump is going to be displaced by the increased cost of fuel. Just about every society today is affected by inflation. I actually don't know what it is. Whether I've seen the inflation in Europe. I've heard about the inflation in Russia, obviously from the sanctions. We've heard about the inflation in China for the last 20 years, basically. The income grew, but the price of a Starbucks coffee in Shanghai is exactly the same cost as New York. So I mean, in effect, we have inflation everywhere. It's not going to cause a revolt because everyone recognizes the inflation is everywhere, and so we have to distinguish between the basal inflation and the added value inflation caused by bad politics. And I think Americans are going to be pretty forgiving to Trump. I know they love their cars. I know they like to drive around. But it's probably just going to shift investments into electric cars or something. It's like the 1973 oil crisis. It never resulted in a revolt. It never resulted in an American Revolution. It never killed a presidency. It never led to the Americans invading the Middle East. People just absorb higher fuel costs. Those are my points.
Julia, I want to ask you, since you know quite a bit, I'm sure you're following what's going on in Pakistan. How is the oil situation? I mean, I know, of course, well, we can read about how India is being very badly affected, um, and that they're, rationing gas, for example. But I'm just, curious how Pakistan is suffering or not from the oil
Pakistan.
markets and the cost and all that. Because I mean, the other thing again is, of course, the price of fertilizer is starting to, jump too, and that could cause scarcity of food in a lot of countries, and that could precipitate some, revolts or revolutions.
Regarding fertilizer, India and Pakistan are both, and Bangladesh, they're all food exporters. But Pakistan, of course, very desiccated, heavily dependent on fertilizer. Oil, of course, is not the problem. Many of the tuk-tuks and a lot of the vehicles in Pakistan operate off of gas
Okay.
and kerosene and other sort of, I'm not entirely sure which one, but they all have these
I think those are called distillates, or that's. I think
yeah.
that's
So I mean, I mean, what I've seen in Dawn is that which is their main newspaper, is it's a crisis. In general, Pakistan is a brave face. They're 1/7 of the size of India in population. They basically have a military about half as strong as India, but Pakistan is in reality poor. It's got worse ecological situation. So the shortage of fuel in the Middle East is hurting it a lot harder. The thing is, India has very good relations both with Saudi Arabia and Iran, and Pakistan's got decent relations with both, but on a slight advantage over India, but just a slight advantage. Pakistan doesn't get any special advantages out of its greater vulnerability. It's hurt very hard.
right. Oh, and one other interesting thing I heard from, I'm trying to forget who, was it? It wasn't Scott Ritter. It was some military guy was talking about. Oh, it might have been Danny Davis. He was talking about how, again, the alliance. Yeah, you talked to Saudis and the Pakistanis, and that they're actually again talking about doing essentially kind of collaborating on military industry, where again Saudis would provide the money and the Pakistanis would build the weapons for them and for themselves, and essentially create their own arms industry independent of the Chinese, the Americans, Russians, the big the guys they're buying their weapons currently from, essentially.
Well, I'm going to be forgive me for my Pakistani parochialism, but Pakistan actually, I don't think, has much to learn from either the Saudis or the Chinese. I was speaking to someone at the Dupuy Institute who more or less agreed with me that the Pakistani shooting down of the Chinese aircraft was not even using Chinese doctrine. It was using Chinese data links, Chinese technology. But if I had to describe a sister service to the Pakistanis, meaning an army they interact with and they go to the military colleges of frequently, it's the British. The British to this day have a strong informal connection. It maintains Pakistan's professionalism. I don't think the Pakistanis believe the Saudis can absorb the technology or the techniques. I think the Pakistanis think the Saudi army is a crony tribal military force that protects the princes and is incompetent, since the Kafji attack where Saddam hit that coastal town. I think the Pakistanis are impressed by China, but I think the Pakistanis and the Chinese have a good understanding. Many Pakistanis study in China, but more Pakistanis study in Europe, and many Pakistanis sneak into Taiwan. So, it's a complicated type of relationship, but they don't really understand each other culturally. Obviously, Pakistan thinks of Iran as an older, more mature society with a long history. And Saudi Arabia is a aberration that'll last for only a century because of the fuel. And the Baloch are always going to be there. And Pakistan partners with Iran, as you mentioned, in dealing with the Baloch. And the Baloch are not the Taliban. They're much better organized because for 800 years, they were the army of the Omani slave trade run out of Zanzibar. These guys are centralized. They have artillery. They have connections. They have communities everywhere. And I mean, the Taliban have never attacked the Pakistanis with artillery. The Taliban, the Baloch do all the time. I had students from both sides of the border and who described to me mistreatment by the Iranians and the Pakistanis. I mean, there's a good reason why the Pakistanis and the Iranians have a strong hand over both of those regions. It's because they're well organized and potentially volatile, and both Persia and Pakistan, the Punjabis and the Persians are less than 50% of the population of either of those two countries.
Ken, you got to unmute. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm muted. No, I'm unmuted now. Jim, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I'll let Chris and others get into it.
Yeah, let's get Chris in.
On Friday, I'm going to have somebody come on from the UAE who teaches at University of the Arab Emirates. He's an American, and he's going to talk. And then I'm arranging sometime in the next few days 2 of the Iranian hostages from 1979. Barry Rosen and John Limit. They were both State Department officers, and they are going to come. And then there is a professor at the University of Indiana on Friday, an Iranian American. I'm going to get him on next week. And then there's another professor, Iranian American, who teaches in Los Angeles, and I'm going to try to squeeze him in. I did get his book, and I will, you guys know how I distribute those PDFs. I'll send them out, but I'll hold my comments until later. Go on, Chris.
First of all, Jim, I want to apologize to you. You were gracious enough to reach out to me so we could connect when I was at Columbia, but the schedule just got too crazy. So maybe I'll catch you next time.
No sweat, man.
Was it Julian that was saying that he didn't think gas prices would get Trump into deep trouble?
Yeah.
Well, I have never wanted to disagree with something more recently than that. That man ran on no foreign wars. That man ran on, I'm going to lower your prices. I can guarantee you, if gas prices hit in the South about $4 a gallon, he's dead. He better triple his security force. And let's not forget, and I'm going to be a little bit mean here, it's redneck, rural Trump voters who have to drive the longest distances to get to where they work, who have to use their cars to do their blue-collar menial labor because they're the least educated voting bloc in the country. Kind of hit a Harvard snob coming out now. Yeah. They don't take the subway to work. And I'm going to enjoy watching them whine about it because they voted for that man for some racist reasons, some misogynistic reasons. And now their racism and their misogynism is going to screw their lives. And I'm going to be sitting someplace smiling, watching it. But I totally disagree with you intellectually. There may be some points in history when people escaped the scorn of rising gas prices, but this ain't going to be one of them.
Sorry, Jim. Aaron, can I respond?
Go ahead.
Yeah, super fast. Yeah, no, I think you have a really good points there, Chris. My interpretation of the Republican Party around Trump is that first of all, the grassroots of the party, the core of the party, not necessarily where the money comes from. It could come from big business, but its redistribution is managed by small business owners. Small business owners account for most of the staffers, most of the organizers. Obviously, they're not most of the voters. These people don't like regulations. And this comes from an article by the Lind Report, which I was reading yesterday or the day before. And so in the Lind Report, we have this idea of, big corporations and white power are basically driving the Republicans today. Certainly the vote, you have a very large, sort of last stand of the 65% of Americans that see themselves as white. So there's definitely that component for voting. But the guys that are going to be able to redirect the anger, who are going to find another strategy to get people to come out to vote, are the staffers. And small business is happy with Trump. I mean, that's the thing. They're happy with Trump because, aside from getting rid of the regulations, they don't like the DEI. It's not because they don't like DEI. I think it's because they don't want to be bothered with any regulation that becomes a burden. Lynn's argument is that all the big companies like Exxon, they already have big staffs of lawyers who've already pre-calculated the cost of regulation. So they prefer the Republicans, but they can deal with the Democrats. So my impression is that you're going to get hit with a lot of gas. But as long as everyone in America is hit with gas, they're not going to complain too much. And, finally, I mean, Luther was on this show a couple of weeks ago, and he said he would forgive everything Trump did as long as he built a wall and kept the immigrants out of Mexico. And so they're going to forgive Trump for the high price of oil as long as they still think they're living in, Rebecca's Sunnybrook farm.
Hey, Julian.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
The Latinos are already going to screw the Republicans.
I got to throw one thing in here, just right in the middle. Isn't higher gas prices favorable for saving the climate? People are less likely to drive. People are less likely to eat the bed. Well, they don't care,
Not in the short term, they don't care.
No, they not might care. But what about the left that wants to save the planet?
Well, that ain't gonna make the
gas
left
prices help to save the planet?
Ken, nothing will make the left like Trump ever.
Yeah.
So it won't matter. Even if they were going to be moved by that climate thing, the left despises Trump. He can do nothing. Mother Teresa could kiss him. They still hate him. I know because I'm one of them. I'm not even the left. I'm more middle left. But Julian, if you had shifted 1 out of every 50 Trump voters in 3 states, he wouldn't be president right now. I've done the math. There are enough independents and enough somewhat not super MAGA types who are going to be so pissed that gas thing goes awry that the Republicans are going to get killed in the midterms, and I'm going to enjoy watching it. You don't need all of MAGA to hate him. You just need about 1/10 of them to hate him, and that'll do it.
Okay, so Chris, super fast response. You must agree that it depends who the Democrats run.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, let me just throw this out here, just so you guys get a study of my complexity. If I ever get in a room again, and I have been before with some of the people I'm going to name, with Barack Obama, Jim Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, and Schumer, they're going to hate me because I'm going to tell them I think they're punks and stupid. Because what they should have done, old school politics wise, that's what I would have done. About 2022, they should have all gotten in a limo and gone into the White House. They should have stopped with Joe Biden first. They just should have said, your ass is too old, you're decrepit, nobody's listening to you. If you try to run, we're going to call a press conference, and all 5 of us are going to say what we just said to the public. So leave with some dignity and shut the hell up. Then they should have gone down the hall and said to Kamala, people don't like you. You're not the one either. The only reason we might be stuck with you is because the sister girls, I'm talking about Black women in America now, the sister girls are going to have a revolt if we don't run your sorry behind. So you are going to go on national TV, make something up. We don't care. You're going to say you don't want it. If you don't do it, we're going to screw you for the rest of your political life too. That's what should have happened. And then I've heard that Obama tried to make this happen behind the scenes. But this is classic milk toast Barack Obama. He tries to make it happen. Just think what Trump would have done if somebody was going to run that he didn't want to run. See, that's the part of Trump I respect. He would have made that shit happen. I know people very, very close to Barack. He will not enjoy talking to the person that has one more Harvard degree than he does.
So, sorry, Chris, if I could respond, Aaron? Okay, I guess I'm taking that as a yes. So I completely agree, Chris. I would submit that if the Republican candidate, the new Republican presidential candidate, cannot demonstrate or convince people that they have some ability in foreign affairs and an ability to negotiate with Middle Eastern governments or European and East Asian countries to deal with the diplomacy necessary to open the Strait of Hormuz, then Americans would be indifferent between a Republican and a Democratic candidate. So the Republicans can still. We're talking, the midterms. Well, for the midterms, it would be Trump versus local candidates. So it's still possible for the Democrats to screw this up, primarily because we know that secret report that the Democrats used to look at why they lost. And the Democrats are very pro-Israel. They're very pro-Israel in Gaza. So as long as the progressives are being sidelined by the mainstream in the Democrats, then Trump has a chance.
No, but anyway.
All right, let me jump in here, Ken. All
Yeah,
right,
go
now,
ahead.
I want to talk about the election issues and also this fallout from Joe Kent resigning. Now, the Democrats just did a survey about their average voters, and guess what? They came up with the average voter. I was listening this morning on Morning Joe, and I sort of went and double checked it. I went and followed up, looked at the actual source itself, and discovered that they were right. The average Democratic voter is a 55-year-old white woman who didn't go to college, which sort of blew my mind. And, you look at that, compare it to the demographics we have about the Republican voters who generally fall in the category of Trump was able to mobilize white males who didn't go to college and a certain amount of white females who didn't go to college to get over the edge. So that is the argument they were making, is that's the messaging that has to go on with the Democratic Party. Now, the question, of course, in the Democratic Party, you look at the primaries that happened in Illinois. There were sort of Zoran Mamdani type candidates who did well, who are moving in the ranks of the Democratic Party in Illinois, but they did not win the primaries in certain key races. And so that is a reflection of the politics of Illinois and my attitude towards sort of these kind of left Democratic candidates coming out of the woodwork here, which we're going to see, is that just simply will reflect the complications and the diversity of the opinion in the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, with this question of Trump's involvement with the war, like, let's look at what just happened today with the hearings on Capitol Hill with Tulsi Gabbard, Radcliffe, the guy in charge of the DIA, Kash Patel, etc. What did Tulsi Gabbard do? She basically put the onus of burden on Trump in terms of the intelligence estimate. She said that he was the one who could be the arbiter of the intelligence estimates, which of course is ridiculous because that's basically the role of her in her position as the national intelligence guru, if you will, in terms of overseeing all these different communities. And Joe Kent resigning. I mean, sure, this is because Joe Kent is sort of individual who is way out there on the far right. He'd go on the Nick Fuentes show, talk with Nick Fuentes, and then he sort of, today I think he went on Tucker Carlson, talking about what he felt. But what he did say that was interesting is he basically argued that there was no intelligence giving the idea that there's an imminent threat from Iran. In other words, the whole question of the nuclear issue, which is going to be hotly debated. What did Trump say? They were a week or 2 weeks away from having an atomic bomb. Now, I guess what he meant was a dirty bomb, which they could certainly create with the amount of uranium they had at 60% enrichment. But that's a different than putting on a bomb on a warhead. And again, you know, what are they? They're now in a situation where they're sitting there. If you look at the Wall Street Journal today, they're talking about well, the difficulties about mounting a commando raid into Iran to find out where the uranium is, if it's still buried in, was it Natanz or Fordouse, in those two locations. And of course, by now, who knows where the hell it is? It's probably been dispersed out of there. And who knows how they're tracking it. We have no idea because we're not privy to the. There is, by the way, a very good article in the Wall Street Journal about the Israeli intelligence services, how they are fine-tuning, seeking to kill all these different people. But that does not, and that leads to the last question. Okay, so you can have this amazingly effective killing machine, which I have no doubt is when you put the U.S. Air Force together with the U.S. Naval and U.S. Marine Corps air assets with the Israeli Air Force, I have no doubt that you have one of the most effective air forces in the world. Because, you know, we all here, some of us are very familiar with what they're like or have a good respect for their capability. But that's different than saying that they're going to actually produce a political effect that is the one that was promised. That is that the whole population is just basically going to run away like they're in H.G. Wells' novel Invader from Mars, and all these air platforms are dispersing us, and we're going to have to surrender, which is just bullshit. Now, I'm not a fan of the Iranian Revolution. I'm going to be talking probably in 2 weeks with somebody who was in prison. I think you guys listened. Some of you did. I think Julian was here and Alice was here. And we had that Columbia faculty member on who was in prison for 7 years. And he basically, his attitude was right on with the bombing. You know, he was tortured by the RGC. So I can understand that. But it's still at the end of the road is a real problematic situation to see how he is going to, quote, implode a society simply by bombing and having great accuracy with where he delivers the bombs. I mean, we're now talking about bombing checkpoints of the Basij and all this. There's no doubt that they can go deal with them and attack them sort of like out of a science fiction movie, out of Terminator, you know, with that kind of precision. But does that mean that people are not going to resist them if they decide not to? That's, of course, ridiculous. Human beings will fight them and resist them. And again, whether you like it or not, the Iranian Revolution has a certain amount of support in the population, which, again, we don't know the actual numbers of because we're not sitting there taking opinion polls or getting any kind of accurate assessment of what's actually happening in a result of this air campaign. All we're seeing is like the description of the population in Iran. Look at what happened. The front page of Washington Post 2 days ago, they're saying the Israelis are fully aware that if the population rises up, they're going to be shot down. Yet they're going to publicly keep on talking to have the population rise. So, I mean, this is ridiculous. This is an absolutely absurd situation. It's, and Trump, and look what's going on right now. They're having a debate in the Senate over the SAVE Act, which, if it's passed, will essentially, as Trump says, he hopes it'll guarantee the power of the GOP for 50 years in the Senate and the House. And that's one reason, of course, to have it make sure it's defeated. So, it's a very complicated situation, but Trump is going to, if everything works along the lines of how this campaign will happen, he's not going to succeed. And the sooner we figure out a way to help, gracefully get out of this mess, the better.
Okay, we have a new participant who everybody knows Aaron. Are you prepared to contribute on this regarding what's the position of the U.S. in attacking Iran? Is it just we're going to choke on our own greed and avarice and humility, the lack of humility? Or is there some kind of a doorway into a future that's more stable? Yeah, how do you like that? That's pretty sophisticated rhetoric.
Yeah. No.
What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah. Quick question. I know Julian had his hand up. Did you?
Yeah. Julian, you go ahead while Aaron's thinking
Yeah.
about it. Go ahead, Julian. You go first.
I'm only going to give Aaron a 10 seconds of respite. I want to point out that in the chat, I put a link to an article I wrote with an Iranian colleague in 2022 on why the Iranians didn't build the bomb. And it was an answer to, I don't know if it was Joan or Gail who asked that. I put the article, a link to the Lind article on the anatomy of the Republican Party, which supports my argument that they're going to be forgiving for Trump's higher oil prices. And I also put a link to a game that my students play every year for the last almost 25 years, where it's a map that's hexagonal. I got 60 students, and they play the Israelis, the Iranians, the Saudis, the Americans, the Japanese, and it's basically an hour video on the rules for that game. And I can tell you the game that we played on Tuesday, exactly what that what we just discussed. The Israelis sent in a special raid that was completely unnecessary on a SAM site that they thought were guarding a nuclear weapon site, and the special forces unit, which was a substantial part of the Israeli special forces unit, was defeated, which has not happened in a game in a decade. So low probability disasters happen. I would not put people on the ground in Iran personally.
Oh, and Julian, I would recommend, I know if you have it, you and your students, Next War Iran to run, because their map is basically the Straits. I mean, they don't have cargo on their map, so you would need to create your own to do that. And they have, I think they have a pretty accurate order of battle for the Iranians. And, obviously they have a much more considerable force than like a single MEU or, and
yeah, so we
I mean, their scenarios for like, the entire 82nd Airborne and like a Marine division on like D1 or so, essentially.
Yeah, so we played that game in June of 2025. It's basically the center.
Yeah.
It's got 20 anti-ship missile sites that are mobile that move around on the map.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But the mining system is abstracted. So you don't need.
Right. Yeah. They did. That's how the system.
There
works,
are 3,000 small vessels. Now, so we know that Trump killed like 25 mine layers, half of which are just ferries. But there are 3,000 small vessels that are incredibly easily hidden. So the problem, we compared that game to Charles Camps, who did a 1984 landing at the Straits. And you remember Joseph Balkowski, who did the Fleet series, and he did something called Light Division.
And doesn't Mark Herman have a scenario somewhere in Gulf Strike?
Where you as well. Yeah. In fact, Gulf Strike is the link I put. The article I put in a link to an article where I used Mark Herman thing. In all of those, they exaggerate how easy it is to destroy anti-ship missiles on a coast. The reality is it's almost impossible, and it's not because you can't put a bomb. Like as you heard today, the U.S. dropped a Moab or a series of Moabs from B-2, these giant bombs onto bunkers. It's not that you can't blow up an anti-ship missile. It's that you will never be able to distinguish them from a decoy. It's the reason that 2006 war with Israel went on so long, is there is no difference between a Katyusha tripod launcher and a child's swing set. You can't.
Or even like mosaic paintings. It's hilarious because the Israelis and us, they put out these videos, and people look at them. The OSINT people look at them carefully. They're like, they're just shooting it. They're just bombing a painting on the ground. So that looks like an F-14 or a missile or something. The other thing also I read, Ted Postal mentioned again, which I think is that the Iranians, well, again, they have what I think it's 5 kilo class submarines that could disperse mines, but also that more importantly, they have 20 North Korean mini subs that nobody's talking about, and those can very easily mine the Straits. So, and again, we know historically, actually, mines have, well, in certain wars, mines took out more ships than basically yeah, than combat vessels did.
Oh,
And I think again, there's I was just again been reading again about the German invasion of Greece. But what people don't forget again is at the end, it's I think yeah, Fifth Panzer that they're shipping back all of their equipment to Toronto, and basically just one little British mine layer again mined like the area, the straits like near Corfu, one of their merchant ships with like more than 100 tanks and other armored vehicles on it. I don't know, sorry, two of them got hit, and basically they took out the half the equipment of an entire Panzer division. Basically, all put it out of and that was important because again that Fifth Panzer eventually wound up in Barbarossa, so that delayed some of the. So again, yeah, that's just again from a small number of mines that were like late in the night, and again the Germans didn't bother to sweep because they didn't think anybody was out there.
Yeah, so if I could add to something you said, definitely. So World War II, the ratio was 60 mines to the ship, and it was a rule that worked it was one of those constants that worked in every theater against every enemy. German mines against the Brits against the Japanese against the Americans. Now the Iranians have 3,000 mines of two types: a ground and a surface, not a surface mine, but just immediately subsurface. They apparently put 6 of them into the water, but they still have an enormous number of these mines. Iran is actually far from closing the straits. There's a lot more things they can do. If they are attacked by land, it's very likely they could just sort of release all these mines and cause a significant trouble. They did have 3 Kahila subs. My understanding is that only one is operational. It was in dry dock, and it went to sea about a month before this altercation happened. But the other 2, I don't know what happened, but they became non-operational. I'm not sure why. But you're right about the North Korean subs. And of course, the Persian Gulf is shallow. It's the perfect environment for the much quieter diesel electric subs. And so there's a question as to whether the U.S. would put a nuclear sub to do anything more than simply listen to the Persian Gulf. Because you wouldn't want to be ambushed by the quieter diesel sub.
Okay. Hey, question, Julian, how do you get this kind of information? What's your source?
Okay, so I can tell you what I've done the last 2 months.
On the submarines. How do you know 2 of them?
I shared with Alex the IISS, I think this week. You got it, Alex?
Yeah, and you sent out the military balance, which I haven't yet had the time to look at. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, every year
it's but explain to Ken.
What is that?
Yeah, explain for them, Julie.
Yeah, so the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London publishes every year a book that lists all the weapons of all the countries. It's not the greatest source. It's been going on since 1958. I have all the copies, but it's a good starting point. You start with that, and then you go to the next level. And so obviously I can talk to people regionally who can get us more information. Jim, who's here, helped compile the list of Iranian Basij, IRGC, and regular army brigades and divisions across Iran with all the headquarters. And I put that into a chart so that you could see who's co-located. So Jim, thank you very much for that. It was very helpful. So that's where we get the information. But Ken, I just had one more detail. In the last 2 months, I've read 35 books on wargaming. I'm going to put the list. Sorry, I'm going to put a link in the thing here from Stanford University. They have PDFs of what must be 400 wargame rules, not commercial war games, but secret, classified American government operations research war games by the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy especially, about different contingencies. And probably the second most common contingency that they studied post-Cold War and during the Cold War was closure of the straits. The main one was the Soviets driving to the Rhine. So it astounds me that no one in the U.S. government didn't, from multiple agencies or anyone retired, didn't go to Trump and tell him, if you do this, the straits will be closed. I mean, it's the choke point for oil exports. I mean, everyone in the Navy knows what you're supposed to do. Everyone in the Marines has done one scenario of landing there. And the fact that you would start a war and not know how it would end in the most studied choke point on the planet is to me shocking. I'm going to
Yeah,
put
it's quite, it's frankly, we have to actually determine if in fact that is accurate and true, because if it is, it's of monumental stupidity. Monumental stupidity. It just is mind-boggling because whenever you talk to people who were involved, for example, in the seminar at Columbia, Gary Sick, who was the national security advisor on Iran, we were talking about doing a teach-in. Now, the problem with doing a teach-in at Columbia is that you have to do it in this sort of quasi-secret kind of situation because of the nature of the compromised settlement with Donald Trump. So it's being organized. But then we were talking about this issue of the Straits of Hormuz. Now, he was a naval officer at that time, he was a captain in the Navy. And the idea that the Straits of Hormuz being closed is some new mystery to people is absurd. Absurd. It is just truly absurd. I interviewed years ago the commander of the Vincennes, that was the cruiser that went up during the tanker war. He's the guy commanded the Aegis class cruiser that shot down the Iranian passenger aircraft. And he wrote a book about that. And, it's something that haunts the guy for the rest of his life. And I put him on the air at WBAI, put him on the radio. This is not a rocket science kind of issue. The narrowing of the straits, we know it's what, 20 to 30 miles at its most narrow. It actually has problems with the drafts of the ships going through there. So there's actually predicted kind of probably the best person to get in here is the guy who does that. We had him on a month ago, who did that, who does that daily, weekly podcast on shipping. That Italian American guy lives in North Carolina. Maybe I should contact him because he would have a really good idea about the problems of the shipping. To convoy the ships in and out of there is a really interesting problem. And this is why he wants all the extra surface ships, because about 25% of the active combatants of the U.S. Navy that could be deployed at any one time were already in the Gulf and in the Mediterranean. Another 25% are on their way. Who knows what it means that they got to mobilize all the ships, because normally they're rotating them in and out there on maintenance. When they come back from a long deployment, it's for morale purposes, the crews have to stay ashore, and there's all sorts of reasons why we rotate the aircraft carriers back and forth into the positions they were on. I think another aircraft carrier group is on the way.
Right.
I'm talking about an attack aircraft carrier, not the Tripoli, which is probably going to be there within a week.
And Jim, what are your thoughts on the people who think it was sabotage? That some of the crew are just
who the hell knows?
That they've been deployed too long, or they don't want to get in the war.
Who knows?
They basically sabotage.
You're talking about the Gerald Ford?
Yeah. Because I mean, it's happened before the Navy's history, espally in
the
Vietnam.
Kitty Hawk. You had rebellions like the Kitty Hawk. I mean, there were rebellions in the late '60s in the Navy, but who the hell knows? I mean, it's sort of everybody's going to be looking for something that reinforces their assumptions. So you have to actually keep that in mind with all this crap going on. You just don't know what the truth is.
Sorry, Jim.
Let me finish, Julian. And so just to sort of, it just is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I use the word stupidity. I don't like to use that word too often, but this is truly stupidity. And today, Tulsi Gabbard basically said, who's the most important intelligence officer in the United States? Donald Trump. Now that is an oxymoron, frankly. So, it's just, and again, we're not talking about, this is objectively, there's all sorts of evidence. There's studies about, how, if you close the straits, you have to actually seize Bandar Abbas. You have to go ashore with a large force. And a goddamn battalion of Marines, however badass they are, is not enough troops. You know, you need a brigade, if not a division plus, to do this. And this is like way beyond what Trump is talking publicly to the people. That's why you go to get a sense of these congressmen and senators coming out of these classified briefings and basically freaking out. You know, if you watch on Capitol Hill when they come out of these briefings. And today, of course, they came out of a whole bunch of briefings, including one on the Epstein file, where they stormed out of there and accused Pamela Bondi of all sorts of dastardly deeds. And so this is all this mishigash bouillabaisse still brewing along, and we'll just see how this affects the midterms. And Trump trying to actually destroy part of the Constitution that delegates the power of elections to the states, which is what the SAVE Act is all about, is just a travesty, total travesty. And, he can justify it any goddamn way he wants, but it's essentially a monumental act of voter suppression, monumental. To ask people to come and buy passports and come in with their birth certificates. A lot of Americans don't know where the hell their birth certificates are. It's ridiculous. Anyway, go on, James.
Jim, I just want to say 3 things. I put the link to the Excel file of your research on the Iranian army, which people can download. I put the link to the Hoover Institution War Games, and it's got 4 links at the bottom. You can download, if you have 3 hours, the rule book to several hundred war games from the 50s on, the government secret war games. And I also put the link to the Military Balance 2026. So you can download.
And I agree 100% with Jillian on the military balance. You got to take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, Chris, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to say, you can't get drawn into the BS. Everybody, of course, they briefed him on the straits issue. I told you already, he's gambling with your money, your life. He doesn't care that the risk is really high. If there's 1 out of 1,000 chances that he can pull off a miracle, he'll push the button on it. There's no way he doesn't know about it. He'll lie and say he didn't know about it. I frankly think we diminish our own intelligence. So I don't participate in it. You guys can. I think you diminish your own intelligence when you even speculate that he had logical reasons or that he didn't know or somebody didn't tell him. Of course they told him. He doesn't care. Or maybe he got somebody to tell him some miraculous story about how he could, manage it regardless of what the real risks were that he was being told about. The man lies every time he opens his mouth. We all know it. And so, for example, when earlier in tonight's conversation, when somebody said, I think it was you, Jim, and I'm not attacking you, I'm just kind of attacking like how we're even discussing the man. We're normalizing the most ridiculous and worst aspects of human nature with this person. When somebody said earlier, when he made reference to that they were 2 weeks away from having something or another. And you said, well, maybe he was referencing A or B. He was referencing whatever he thinks you're stupid enough to think he was referencing. He lets you fill in the blank to justify what he says. Now, his diehard sycophants, they don't even need to fill in the blank. They just fill it in with his name. I mean, like he's God or something. It's a little bit like the ridiculousness with traditional religion, which I grew up in because my father was a Baptist minister. And, there's this saying, especially in the Black church, there's even some songs where they say it, referring to God. They say, he may not come when you want him, but he's always right on time. Really? I think if he doesn't come when I really need him, he wasn't on time for me. But just saying. And so, there's this same logic with Trump. No matter what happens, it was all good. It's like with God. Well, if I pray for my mother to come off the hospital deathbed, and she does, well, God did it. But if she dies and doesn't come off the deathbed, well, the Lord works in mysterious ways. It's okay. These people have given Trump that same ridiculous religious sycophant status.
Yeah, let me just add to that for a second, Kenny. One thing that's interesting is to watch how they're going after Tallarico in the state of Texas on the issue of religion and the interpretation of the New Testament. Very interesting because Tallarico has an attitude about the Old Testament and the New Testament, which is sort of along the lines of what I feel. That, the New Testament is a document that is one that Jesus talks about dealing with the poor, etc. And they're attacking him in an amazing way. And we're going to see that introduce itself into the race because to have a seminarian like Tallarico running for the Senate, where a Democrat candidate can actually deploy the Bible right back at their faces.
Yes,
Love it.
yes,
I
yes.
love it. I love it. I love it.
Me too. And a
Sorry,
way better shorts for the Democrats than Jasmine Crockett running, by the way.
sorry, can I just share two quick points? The first, I think Chris is right because Tucker Carlson, in one of his podcasts, I think it was like just after the war started, mentioned that he approached Trump and asked him, is he going to bomb Iran? And tried to convince him not to. And Trump's answer was, don't bother. In other words, I think Chris is right. Trump had already decided. He was informed. I guess what surprised me was how few defections there were from the US government and how few leaks there were from the US government when it was decided to bomb Iran, given their stance on the Straits. I was sort of surprised about that. Something that you get, Jim, the invitation to the Dupuy group on occasion. There's a guy there called Paul Weber, who's an MCM, surface warfare officer equivalent. And he did one of his two tours during the Gulf War. And he was there when the Tripoli hit a mine off the coast of Kuwait. And so we were bugging him at the last meeting to tell us a little bit about mines. And he was telling us what he could. And this guy's really good at math, so he can generate the formulas to describe how you find and hear these things.
Oh, okay. And just one thing, a possible other motive for Trump is, we don't know what his investments are. So if Trump is, shorting oil stocks, basically, he could be making a lot of money now, or people, not necessarily him, people around him again. If they knew he was going to do this and, could time the market again, you could make, I mean, if you can make a lot of money if you can figure out, okay, when is oil going to go to, $150 a barrel and make, or 100, 200, or make a bet on that, or just go for or against certain stocks. You can, so we have, and we have no idea yet what his investments might be that might be influencing him as well. We know what Trump's done to, including screwing his own people with crypto, his crypto scams. So this could, in some ways, this could be like, just another financial scam of his to make money. Even if, the country goes down, he doesn't, yeah. But, uh, but yeah, Aaron, I'm sure you got surprised he's not. Maybe he's, like
Well,
Jim
no,
said,
I was
watching.
just waiting for,
Oh,
because I do
yeah.
that. I like to
Oh,
wait
by
my
the way, how are you
turn because I
liking
like to respect
March
people.
Madness?
I like to respect people's time when they're talking and stuff. So, um, look, I mean, they've clearly just launched a, haphazard attack, thinking some type of Venezuela shock and awe was going to work. I do think one thing we're underestimating is that I do believe that, probably at least a year ago, probably maybe even more, maybe two, between a year and 2 years ago, the Israelis made a determination that they were going to treat Iran similar to the way they've treated Hezbollah in Lebanon and go through a long-term degradation or an attempt to have degradation against Iranian, or what they considered to be Iranian, offensive military capabilities that threaten Israel, or the way that they define it as threatening Israel. And that last summer, I'm sure Israelis told us at some level in advance, but I doubt it was months and quarters in advance. It was probably more like days and weeks at most. And, probably similar this time, that the Israelis, that like let's take an alternative universe that, President Harris is elected in 24. The Israelis go anyways, right? I think we are in some ways overestimating our sort of strategic leadership in doing this. And of course, Trump, will always, as Chris was saying accurately, he'll take credit for the sun coming up twice a day and the, moon coming up 4 times a night, so I think in some ways we piggybacked on what they were doing this time versus the last time in the summer, where in some ways they reached limits of their strike capacity, or of the ability to have the dent that they wanted to have, and then we sort of jumped in after the fact. And I think this time we just, or I think Trump this time wanted to Americanize this and not let, in some ways, it's sort of like try to steal the thunder from the Israelis in some way. And I think the Israelis tend to be, sometimes too cute for their own good, / not great at media, / not caring either way, that they don't really care about these outcomes. Like they don't care about how messy this is. Actually, in some ways, the messier it is, the more they like it. And we actually could see that by the Israelis, striking the Pars complex, and the Iranians responding by hitting, the Qatar LNG complex. And Trump, this is for the second or third time, I think maybe the third time now in the last 2-3 weeks, sort of jumping in and saying, making it clear the Israelis aren't going to strike Iranian energy complexes after the fact, right? Which to me makes it pretty clear that the Israelis did this without us knowing, or did it independent of us knowing and not caring, which I don't really believe that fully, because the deconfliction that's required to fly, you've got to be able to, you're not just randomly putting up F-35s. So I think in some ways the Israelis go, and I think when it's a target that they know that we won't like, and or anyone else, they'll make a judgment, some 50-50 call, and take the risk, and sort of, live with the consequences. Or I have a friend that we kind of jokingly say, the Israelis kind of have a reverse Pottery Barn. Like they break it, you pay for it, right? Like and I think that's probably more underreported, than almost anything else associated with the conflict over the last year, or whatever. It's been 9 months, because it's not in Trump's interest to, in some ways, show that the U.S. is more of a second fiddle to this. And I think in some ways the Israelis don't even care. So whether they take credit or not, it's sort of secondary to them. And so I think that's something that is a little more interesting to try to tease out. It's always going to be a little more subjective and speculative till probably years later, as Jim would point out, until, all the FOIAs and, all the people come out of the woodwork to explain what happened. But I think if we keep seeing Israelis go anyways, not just now, but in the summer randomly. I think that sort of proves the point. And I would expect that to happen really in some ways independent of the US going forward. And I don't think it would matter if a Democratic administration is in at this point, because I think the Israelis believe they have enough independence of action and armaments capabilities. And I think the most underreported defense relationship in the world is between the Israelis and the Indians, because the Israelis sell the top end of the tech stack to the Indians for about 10 billion a year, and the Indians sell, given the rupee shekel kind of advantage in terms of value, the Israelis get about another 10 to 20 billion worth of what you might call the middle to middle bottom end of the munition stack. And in some ways they've sort of de-risked themselves for the most part from the US, independent of administration at this point. I think that's extremely underreported, right? I don't think it's just reported at all, because it speaks to sort of irrelevance by all parties. And that means Israel can operate completely unconstrained, except to what they want to do, themselves. And I don't think there's any constraints you can really put on them. I mean, what's a Democratic administration going to? I mean, I think the only constraint could be possibly, an anti-Israeli MAGA administration, which would almost be like, sort of an AOC administration towards Israel, right? It would become anti-Semitic, anti-Israel in all forms. And even that, the Israelis would just say, whatever, you're not going to shoot down the F-35s. So what are you really going to do? So I think in some ways the largest story here is how Israel is becoming sort of completely disconnected from American sort of governance and power and bargaining power going forward.
That's an interesting take, I think. In other words, you give it even if Trump pulls out and says goodbye, I'm bored, and he leaves and just abandons it, Israel is autonomous or unilaterally can continue to barrage or annoy or whatever.
Well, yeah, and one last quick point, because I know others are going to jump in, is I think Israel's made a decision that the original decision, whatever, forever was Iran couldn't have nuclear weapons. Then that evolved, I think, since October 7th and sort of other responses that they can't have ballistic missiles. And I think since the last year, it's evolved to they can't have air defenses. And so, so it becomes basically a free fight, a free fly zone for the Israeli Air Force, or as close as possible. And I think at some point, the Israelis will add something else to that, whatever that is. And I think it's really important to understand that Israel does not care about the Persian Gulf, because the relationship it has in the energy markets is radically different than most other states, right? I mean, I think people don't actually understand how Israeli energy consumption works and what what energy it uses. And in some ways, it's somewhat disconnected from mainline energy markets, a lot more like Turkey is.
Right, but if Trump pulls and he says goodbye, I'm done. Well, I don't know what's Iran. Oh, I thought it was Iraq. I'm sorry, forget about it. And now Israel is all set up to. Iran can't defend itself against a land attack or air attack from Israel.
I do think
they could just go and pepper them. They don't have to
I mean, I think objectively, an attack of this scale is going to be extremely rare, but they will do much more continuous surgical attacks.
That's right. And let's say the Democrats gain control, and there's a Democratic president, Congress, and Senate. They're not going to stop Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I predict
they're not going to defend
funding.
Iran from Israel.
Yeah, I predict the Democrats will cut off funding, and basically hard MAGA anti-Israel right will cut off funding too. I think there's a what do they call that, horseshoe effect there. So I think at some point Israeli funding will get cut off and maybe turned on a little bit, whatever, and the Israelis will, I mean, they'll get what they can out of it, right, whenever it's turned back on, right? They'll do a little, quick Walmart Target run to get all the buy for 88, by 5 p.m., and so they'll grab whatever they can, but that'll be completely secondary. They won't really care.
Okay, so I want to go to Chris, but I have another point on this before we close off. I'm getting late. People want to watch the Late Show or something. The question is alternative. If there was no Trump and nothing's done, what could have been done or should have been done to get Iran to shift towards more cooperative behavior with the rest of the modern civilization and not try to get an upper hand over its contiguous neighbors and, fighting with the Sunnis and, the concept and trying to get nuclear weapons or dirty or clean or whatever you want to call them, and having proxy attacks on Israel or other states and attacking the US and we hate America. What could have been done? Forget about Trump. It was a bad dream. You're waking up. Wake up. It was just a dream. It didn't happen. What is the right way that should have been done to monitor and deal with Iran? And you can include in your response, leave it alone and just hope for the best. So anybody wants a response to that? What could have been done instead of this big military engagement? So there's Alex and I guess Jim. Jim, let go. Jim hasn't spoken in a while. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Well, this sort of gets into some of the issues that Aaron was raising. I think it's true that in the United States right now, there is indeed a variety of responses to this policy of cooperation with Israel in launching this air campaign that has indeed invoked traditional anti-Semitism in some cases, new levels of anti-Semitism. Now to sort of all put that into one big bucket and sort of say that you cannot, if you're going to criticize that phenomena, you cannot separate it from the situation vis-a-vis what happened after October 7th, I think is inaccurate. There's no doubt that the opinion has changed very dramatically in terms of world opinion and domestic opinion in the United States. We're seeing it in the elections right now. Look at the election in Florida. There's a person running for governor who is part of his rationale for running for governor is he's coming out with the most outrageous anti-Semitic bullshit one could ever imagine. Now, what I think in terms of the decision-making in the Trump administration is that there was always this neoconservative appeal, alliance with a strong and well-armed Israel. Along the lines of what the Likud party had argued for when they took power in the late 70s, when the Labor Party was ousted. And they always wanted a bellicose and a sort of expansive Israel. We can get into all the questions of the amount of land that they considered to be part of Eretz Israel, including the West Bank, the annexing the West Bank and Gaza. So you have that element of the body politic in Israel. Now, in the case of the neoconservative elements and wings of the Republican Party, which you don't hear much about, but in a way, the decision-making to go and launch itself in a coordinated military operation with Israel, which sort of follows from the Abraham Accords of the first Trump administration, and essentially having a relationship with the monarchies of the Arab Gulf states, which again has been raised, are ruling over populations of Shia, of Palestinians, of Pakistanis. They have a big mixed bag in terms of their workforce. They used to have a lot of Palestinians in the workforce back in the early in the 70s and 80s, and that's changed. They've diversified their workforce and also extended benefits to those in the various Gulf states. And that's why people are going to Abu Dhabi, UAE, et cetera. It's a different kind of situation. But so I don't think those domestic possibilities of rebellion that were argued about in the 70s, particularly after the October War and during the Gulf oil boycott crisis, I don't think the same conditions exist as they did back then, simply because the policies of the governments have been to diversify their workforce very, very openly because of that problem. Now, in terms of what just occurs with this bombing campaign, there are many, you can make many arguments where this is in line with American traditional foreign policy interests, and that's certainly being made by the Trump administration. They're talking about how it's just simply a continuation of this constant war we've been in, which I think is accurate since 1979. We have been in a clandestine war with Iran ever since 1979, and at times it has broken into an open war with all the different examples, 82, 83 in Lebanon, the involvement with the Iranians in setting up Hezbollah, all the proxy issues, and the proxy issues are another issue that has to be carefully scrutinized intelligently, because to oversimplify it, to talk about them as simply proxies, we have these inequalities and these situations which people may not like, and may not like to talk about the issue of using terrorism as a tactic, but there are reasons why groups do resort to that, and one has to understand the root causes of what has created them to act like this in the first place. And so if you look at it from that point of view, it becomes a little more complicated than just simply reducing everything to terrorism. Now, the issue of Israel deciding to launch these operations with us, I think at the sort of elite level, is something that the United States, those in the Trump administration, they view this as in the interests of the United States. It's not simply a question of being led down the primrose path by Israel. Now that, I think, is how a lot of people are reacting to that popularly, and we can see that all the time in the way people are being surveyed about this in terms of the gas thing. So that's one point. Now, the last point to make is the issue of striking oil facilities. I think that the United States and Israel have a sort of symbiosis in terms of how they're launching this air campaign. Now, if Israel decides to attack oil installations, what the United States does not want to have happen is have the price of oil go up to $150 to $200 a barrel. Because if it does get to that high, it will definitely, first of all, it'll be counterproductive to Trump in his attempt to win the midterms. I mean, he can cheat all he wants in terms of how he's going to try to, maintain the GOP control of Congress. But if you start getting the price of oil up to 150 a barrel, 200 a barrel, all the consequences are so negative that it will just simply pull the rug out right from under him. And already, look at how difficult it is for him to maneuver with the price going up between 90 and 110 a barrel. It's a tightrope for him. So I think that he has to, along with the Israelis, they have to very, very much temper how they're actually striking at oil installations. And this gets into the question of using the Marines. He didn't ask for an amphibious brigade. He didn't ask for a division. He asked for a battalion afloat. A battalion afloat only has the ability to raid. And I don't even think you could take Karg Island with a battalion. Maybe you could, but because it is isolated. It's about 20 miles off the coast of Iran, and that's where you want to actually mess with them if you're going to do that. If he wants to do something like that, he has to actually seize it. But then look at what's going to happen to the price of oil. It's going to skyrocket. So that's, I think, the big problem they have to maneuver about. What would happen to the global political economy and all this, and how it'll backfire in their faces.
Okay, so, but I don't feel you addressed the question. What is the way to handle this without the use of force to overthrow the regime and keep your fingers crossed that somebody sensible takes over? What should have been done?
Well, first of all, they should have. They could have avoided this entire affair if they had relied on the JCPOA process, which at least forced verification of the nuclear capability. He threw that out. He threw that out when he became president the first term. And then the issue of, do you overthrow the government? Well, that's up to the people of Iran. That's up to the people of Iran to overthrow the government. It's not up to the United States to figure that out. And
Mhm.
all that does is conjure up the most base nationalist feelings among the Iranians, going back to the overthrow of Mossadegh in 1953. I mean, that's all. That just jumps right in their brain, and you whether you like it or not, a certain percentage of the population are committed to that point of view.
Well,
And
that's what again, you're talking about what we shouldn't do. I'm saying, what should we do?
I think we should immediately cease this campaign, and try to the first thing I would do is to stop this bombardment right now, which they're not going to do. Trump is not going to do that because politically he'll pull the rug out from under him with his base. His base will rebel even more. So unfortunately, he's sort of locked into a real quagmire because he has his domestic base all enthusiastic, and that would there's just so much you can do. Can you really stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody down and nobody do anything about it? It comes a point where like even his base will rebel. So it's a very tough question, Kenny. I just personally think they have to stop this.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, I'll bet you, Julian.
All right, so I put a
Hold
link
our
in-
hands and walk us out of here without shooting another missile.
All right, so I put a link to an article I wrote 4 years ago with an Iranian journalist. I think 1979 traumatized the U.S. to want to go back to the status quo ante in the Persian Gulf, which is never. It was never reasonable. If you look at how many centuries, well, not like 2 centuries, 19th and 18th centuries, that the British invested in trying to suppress Iranian nationalism so they could, keep the Nadir Shah from building a fleet, which is what he tried to do. The largest non-Chinese, non-European effort to build a fleet, and the British got permission from everyone else to shut it down. The lesson is that Iran is big. It's really hard to suppress, and there's a big difference between trying to stop Iran from being an Islamic regional empire builder and shit disturber versus basic Iranian sphere of influence interests. The basic Iranian interest is the religious sites in Iraq, getting influence back in the Caucasus, and not having Europeans in the Gulf. Now, I get the big issue. You know what? In a world of big powers, you can't always get what you want. So you're going to get this friction. But I think the Americans could have been a lot more deferential after '79 and tell the Iranians, we're going to respect the basic stuff, but we're not going to tolerate the stuff in Lebanon. And so I don't think Iran was so desperate. They engaged in shenanigans, obviously, during the Hajj, and they're trying to get influence in Pakistan and other parts of the world where they're Shia. But I think the U.S. I remember, God, was it Robin Wright, that journalist? Just saying all sorts of insanely crazy stuff in the 1980s about how Iran is going to cause a wave of global. So I think American ignorance of the possibility of what I believe would have been the possibility of having an entente with Iran was missed and never ever pursued. So I think the Americans should have had that type of dialogue. We brought Kenneth Waltz to Concordia. He did a speech on why Iran should get a bomb, which I thought was pretty convincing. I disagree with Aaron. If the Israelis don't have American backing, as they did not in the 1980s, they got minimum defense support. They could do a single raid on Osirak, right? They could do a single raid over here, a single raid over there. Israel's heavy bombardment is 90% the result of huge American weapons provisions and supplies. This is an American decision. Now, I don't think the Israeli lobby is that influential. I think there are a lot of Americans that just don't like foreigners, and I think it fits in with the way that the American electoral system still is, still has tribal voting, where in most of Europe and places like Canada, we've moved past that and we're into gender voting. So if you really, really distrust people abroad and you see the Israelis as a fellow biblical people and you have a right to blow the shit out of people, then you're going to have this violence continue. Now, I do not want to defend the Iranians. I actually think if Gaza was given full independence, they wouldn't look much better than they do now. I mean, the amount of and I'm gonna blame the culture. I think Middle Eastern culture is wildly inefficient, destroys trust. I think of it as a sex cult, right? You have cousin marriages, and so every young boy expects to marry their second cousin. So there've been books written about this by Francis Fukuyama. These are low trust societies. No one likes the government. I've been in Egypt. I've spoken to Egyptian soldiers. They all hate Egypt. The Syrians, I mean, predictably, they broke along sex lines. The people you can marry to have sex with are the people that they stuck with, and the people they couldn't marry, they shot at. So, of course, these countries disintegrate really easily. Now, I think Iran would disintegrate less than, say, Iraq. And, I got to admit, I got a bit of an emotional component. I'd like to see the Israelis hurt the Iranians as much as I saw the Iranians hurt the Ukrainians. So, the Iranians got a little bit too big for their britches. They wanted to play big superpower helper. Of course, the Russians are not helping the Iranians in return. The Iranians, I hope they got paid well for the drones they gave the Russians. So, what should the U.S. have done? They should have some educated people with a long-term foreign policy goal, which is don't let any superpower dominate the Persian Gulf. And that was satisfied, right? The Chinese and Russians didn't have that much influence there, or the Indians. The Indians are a candidate in the next 50 years to have that kind of influence. So that should have been the U.S. grand national strategy, not ignoring Taiwan and Ukraine and constantly going refunding Israel to have these very, very expensive operations, which pisses everybody off. In the long term, and this is the problem, in the long term, as pathetic as the Syrians and the Egyptians and the Sudanese and the Libyans are, and frankly, Dubai and Yemen and Iran, these guys are going to learn to, the idea that they're going to completely forget the history they had with Israel is wrong. They're going to remember it, and they're going to be angry for more than a generation. It's going to be children's story type of stuff. I don't think Israel had a strategy. If you look at what they were doing against Iraq, they did very little because they weren't funded to do that. So they had no option. They just waited and waited. The Israelis will wait. The reason they're bombing now is not because they have a plan. It's because for some reason the Americans are giving them a crap load of firepower. And the Israelis correctly believe that this is going to pass. And it's not because the Americans are becoming more ethical. It's because you're getting immigration from the developing world into the US. All these people of anti-colonial education, they identify Israel as a colonial power. So you get Hindus in India who love Israel, but Hindus in America don't like colonial powers like Israel. And so the Israelis see this closing window, and so they're bombing sporadically. And it's not to hurt Iran. Iran can rebuild any missile program in 3 years with Chinese or Russian help. The nuclear weapons, you can't destroy that knowledge. So there's maybe a few months, maybe a 2 or 3 year delay in them actually detonating a device, if they don't detonate in the next 6 months. But what the Israelis are doing is creating animosity between the Iranians and everyone else. And so, obviously, they're trying to cause trouble so that they can get other people to deal with Iran. That's what I think the Israeli strategy is. The Americans have to stop giving guns to Israel, and they have to have a plan, which they don't have. That's my recommendation.
You're still muted, Ken.
I did that for a reason. But anyhow, Aaron, no, really. Aaron, and then Alex, and then that's it. Go ahead, Aaron.
So Julian, I would agree with your analysis if it was the 1980s and even into the 90s. I think the Israelis, when you look at the data, right, of their defense development at this point, and how much they, as an example, I put links in how much they export to the Indians, the scale of that, and the kind of defense cooperation that they have manufacturing wise, that the things that we used to give the Israelis, or what we believed we had more power over the Israelis in terms of dependency, is just not anywhere near as strong. And the Israelis have, in some ways, very much like the Ukrainians, built an enormous amount, not all, not complete, but a very far along independence of action, and have substantially disconnected from the necessary defense, the U.S. we'll say congressional executive branch, sort of we'll call it the legacy Israeli lobby, support Israel, which still exists, but I actually argue that exists more at a cultural, social, political, media, blah 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 level, not in sort of hard munitions, because you can just look at the data. I mean, Israel is exporting more to India, and India's exporting more to Israel than the U.S. is exporting from a defense standpoint by 2, 3, 4-fold. And so at a certain point, it's sort of mute. It's sort of moot. Now, I think that when you look at this campaign, or the campaign starting last summer, which the Israelis launched initially, and in this campaign, we don't kind of know who went first, but I have to imagine they went pretty fast. It's pretty clear that they, independently of the United States, suppressed, had a very robust said campaign. So if the Israelis can, independent of the United States, maintain, a suppression of air defenses substantial enough that they have at least air control, if not air supremacy, or at least regions where they have air supremacy in Iran, at a certain point, they don't really need the United States. We can try to constrain them other ways. I mean, I think at a certain point, you would have to move to sort of economic, approaches where you are trying to embargo, you're trying to, use the SWIFT system, very similar to the Russian approach, which at this point, the Israelis have made a brilliant move by partnering with the Indians, because the Indians kind of don't care about what anyone wants to do to any partner of India. And so at this point, the same way as the Indians will trade defense and oil with the Russians, and currency and swaps, and other traded goods, they'll do the same thing with Israel if they believe it's in the Indian interest, and the Indians do believe it's in their interest, from a defense procurement standpoint, and at a certain level from an economic standpoint. So there's a lot of for those of you that might not know, there's a nice decent slice of Indian consumer packaged goods that are in Israel now, that are kosher, that are made in. So there's a couple of states in India that have basically the Jewish population, and they manufacture goods for themselves for hundreds of years, obviously, and so they export those goods. I go to India, for work, at least usually once a year or every 2 years for sure now. Used to go, almost twice a year. So it's so I think the Indian strategic relationship is extremely unique, and from my understanding, they're building a similar relationship with Vietnam. And so if Israel builds this other, we'll call it sort of highly independent Asian, Indo-Pacific set of strategic relationships, I don't think the United States or Europe, really have a lot that they can create constraints on. I think create some, but especially when it comes to Iran and Israel wanting to strike Iran when it wants to, I just don't think there's anything the United States is going to be able to do about that. Not definitely in the short term, maybe long term, if we were willing to apply incredible economic sanctions, which the United States has never proven to be a very long-term committed sanctioner, even of Iran. We've come on and off our sanctions over decades for all kinds of reasons, or created exceptions. So if we're not willing to have continuous, knuckle to the ground sanctions against Iran, I mean, obviously we wouldn't be able to maintain that against Israel.
Ken, you keep muting yourself.
Unmute. Oh, look at Mike wants to say something. And then Alex. Oh, no. First that Alex, then Mike, you're going to close it off. You get the monologue at the end to take the bow.
And
Go
Ken,
ahead, Alex.
are those new glasses?
Oh, I don't know.
They
Are
look
they
new.
on upside down? I don't know.
I
I
don't think
got
there's something
lens
don't
on
look.
each
They look
side.
new or anything. I don't know. I thought
Whatever.
maybe you got a new pair. Anyway, or maybe I'm not. I'm used to you not being with glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So again, I agree with Jim. Jim said it better than I could about the JC Poo. Though to add to that again, I think what in the 90s and since we had the option, like with a lot of countries, like do you keep on sanctioning these countries you consider enemies, or do you try and engage them culturally and economically by opening trade to them? And I think that would have been again, that's something we had to do a long time ago. I think that would have helped a lot with tensions and just in terms of developing, if like Julia was saying, again, if they're happy economically, then they're less likely to, want to start a war, I think, in general, even with against somewhat authoritarian countries. But I know if Jim commented on this before, again, just point out that, I'm sure you guys discussed the assassination of Larijani, who, again, everybody's been pointing out, basically, he was a moderate. He's actually, in Iranian politics, again, relatively a centrist. So that tells me Trump and maybe the Israelis, they want this war to continue, and they're basically, they're killing the people the Iranians who would want to negotiate with us, and they, at least for now, again, they're choosing again the hardliners. So that tells me again they actually want this war to go on, and maybe they don't. I don't think it also means they probably don't understand how bad it can get. But again, we know in history again, a lot of people again, make assumptions and just think everything is going to turn out great for them, and lead their countries into a total and utter disaster. They got plenty of wars like that. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Mike, I guess, can take
Okay.
us
Hey,
out.
Mike. Mike, take us out. The real button we're on now is, and there is no Trump. We all wake up from the nightmare and it never happened. What do we
Well,
do?
actually,
What's the right, sane way to convince or modify the position that Iran has and its negative approach and its belligerence and its arrogance and, get it to be more cooperative with the rest of the world and not so aggressive without using the military force?
Right. Okay. But you want something that'll ease us out. So let me just say that what I thought was funny. I obviously I came on late because I spent a lovely 3 hours on the New York City subway system getting home. But I think it's funny that everybody is saying different ideas of what Israeli policy is, and of course, some people I know, Aaron, just using it as an example, said this is what he thinks, which is fine. But nobody knows what Israeli policy is or what Iranian policy is, what their objectives are, what their long-term objectives, what their planning is, or anything like that. None of us know that. This is all conjecture. And the proof will come out in the pudding. I just think it's amusing to hear. I mean, to me, what it's coming across as is everybody saying, oh, yeah, I've got the answer. And, they've got the answer, but it's based on no source of information, or put it this way, no real inside source of information. So it just all sounded pretty funny to me. Everybody can make these deductions and everything like that, but we don't know. We don't know what the Israeli plan is. We can take guesses. I've got my own theories, but the proof's going to come out in the pudding. That's all. And they're not going to. It's not going to matter what we say today or what we say next week or anything like that. So that's about it. I will say one little story that is kind of tied into this, but I don't know if, and you may have discussed this, about the journalist that was threatened because he put out a story about a strike, a missile that was fired at Israel, and whether or not it was shot down or whatever. And he was threatened by a very unusual source. He was threatened by what appeared to be a consortium of gamblers who had been betting. They actually have betting pools on what missiles are going to come in, what missiles are going to strike Iran, what are going to strike Israel, what are going to strike U.S. Troops or Kuwait or whatever. There's betting going on this. So there's a whole other source economic situation going on there. And speaking as somebody who has had some experience with gambling, that's not something I would personally. I mean, that makes sports betting look like a skill. It's kind of, I thought it was kind of strange. A lot of strange stuff going on, and on this show. And I think also it goes back to the idea is a lot of what we're predicting is based on our own agendas. So, sei gesund.
Sorry,
Okay.
if I may add one thing, Aaron.
Go ahead.
Mike. There's a movie done by the Vietnamese and the French. I think it was called Dien Bien Phu. It's a classic war movie. And what Mike identified, the egregiousness, the Vietnamese were known to be gambling during the first Indochina War, particularly when Dien Bien Phu is going to fall. So there's all, sometimes these things do become a big economic thing.
Yeah, look, hey, it's great. It's like Sky Masks and Guys and Dolls betting whether or not one raindrop will beat another down the window. But I just thought it was it's not really amusing. It's kind of again, I think it's
kind of like Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, it's almost farcical. We're now betting on. I mean, pretty soon I'm sure people are betting on when Armageddon is going to come. So,
Which city's going to get hit first?
well, whatever it is. Personally, I'd rather play poker. But people want to bet
Mike,
on these things.
Mike, I
Great.
put the link on the side to the movie Dien Bien Phu, 1992.
Yeah, I know the movie. Yeah, I can. Okay, thanks for the link. But
Okay,
yeah,
everybody.
I know the Vietnamese were gambling. There was a lot of gambling going on in Vietnam, especially during the Vietnam War. So people see a way to make money. It's just like with any war.
It's not
you
much
know.
different than the stock market,
It's not. I mean, people have used wars to make money since the beginning of time. So this is just another way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. All right. Now, all you little children, you got to have your glass of milk and go to bed. It's kind of late, especially on the East Coast.
It ain't late for you, Ken.
Nah, not for me.
Yeah, you can still go.
Right. It's only 8:20 here. Okay. Anybody want to say goodnight? Someday, there we go. That's it. With those hands. Thank you very much. Okay, good night all, and thank you for attending, and hope to see you next week. And keep checking things out. Don't give up on it. There may be
Thanks,
some
Aaron.
logic in somewhere.
Thank you, Aaron.